So we are just 2 days away from the playoffs that is going to begin, and obviously for this news of the week video, I of course will talk about something that's going to be related to the playoffs that's going to start in 2 days, and unfortunately it's not going to be about the playoff matchup, but more to do with what is the big talking point right now in terms of the playoffs about to start, and that of course is that are we actually even going to finish this playoffs? With COVID cases continue to rise across the country, a lot of fans are demanding MLS to potentially go into a bubble, which we'll see whether or not if that is the case. And then there's obviously question in terms of the first round of the fact that are those players that were on international duty just this past week that's going to be ready for the first round. And what happened if there's a situation during the playoffs where will the team get a COVID outbreak? Are there going to be some rescheduling? Or even the worst case scenario, we're going to see something similar to what happened to the USL Championship, where they had to cancel their USL Cup because of the fact that one of the finalists in that competition unfortunately got a COVID-19 outbreak. But, for me, I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible, and that I'm hoping as we get to the playoffs from now to December when we will award the winner of this season, hopefully we can go as smooth as possible. And that, you notice I didn't say anything about hopefully we won't have any worry whatsoever, because that just saying that is just a crazy optimistic kind of standpoint that we know it ain't gonna happen, and that there's gonna definitely be some incident that's gonna go through during this playoffs, and it's not gonna be something that the league are looking to try to fix. But hopefully we can go as smooth as possible, and most importantly, by the time when we get to December, we will actually award an MLS Cup champion for this season. But first of all, let us actually talk about some news, as I mentioned, that is related to the playoffs and the worry about the COVID-19 situation. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is that the MLS is actually looking to use charter flight for players on international duty in attempt to get them ready before the playoffs, which is definitely good news for some of these teams that have players on international duty, and that because the league decided to give them charter flight to get back to the US, they might have to they might bypass some of the protocol and be ready in the first round. And we already saw today that Rodolfo Pizarro of Inter Miami is actually going to be ready for the first round because of what MLS decided to provide him a charter flight back to the US and back to Miami, and that of course he will be available for that Friday game between Miami and Nashville. But the problem is that is really one of the only good news we have heard, because the other thing that article basically talks about this is that MLS also said that they are not going to guarantee that every single player that was on international duty is going to come back to the US via the charter flight, and that they're going to be ready before the playoffs. And we know that is going to be the case, because on the very next news I'm going to talk about is that Diego Rossi has been tested positive for COVID-19. And he's not the only player that got tested positive, and not the only LAFC player that got tested positive. I believe Diego Palacio is another player that got tested positive, and Jose Cifuentes is another player that I heard that got tested positive for COVID-19 too. And we also have heard some situation with other teams, and especially the opponent that LAFC is going to be taking in, the Seattle Sounders. They also have some dilemma of the fact that I've heard reports saying that despite the fact that they're planning to maybe use the charter flight to get some of their international player back, they might not have Gustav Svensson and Xavier Arriaga back into their team, even if they're going to take advantage of MLS providing charter flight for international players to get back to the US. So yeah, this is just kind of a real mess, and that in some way this is kind of just brings a little bit of an unfairness with the way that if you're a team and you have all these players that is on international duty, you almost have to kind of cross your fingers and hope that you're one of the lucky ones that are going to get your players back available for the first round in international duty. And that's just, luck shouldn't be something that you need to rely on for players to be back with your team after they did some international duty. And that, again, it's just complete completely unfair, and I won't be surprised. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to be bickering and criticizing in terms of the unfairness that this is. But unfortunately, that of course is just the case in terms of this playoffs, and there's definitely going to be a lot of unfairness that's going to be happening in the playoffs. Now, speaking of COVID-19 cases, we also had one Revs player that was tested positive for COVID-19. Now, this is kind of interesting because I don't think there's any Revs players that were actually on international duty. So the good news about that is that when you see a player that got tested positive for this, if they get another test and they get a negative test, or 2 consecutive negative tests, that is, they should be available to play for the team. So whoever that player for the Revs, for New England, they're hoping that that player would get 2 consecutive negative tests so that he'll be ready for that game against Montreal on Friday. But if that is not the case, then whoever that player is not going to be available in that game, and New England is going to be really hoping it's not one of their main starter, especially on the attacking end. Now, the other thing that MLS have announced is that they are actually saying that if teams during the playoffs have a COVID outbreak that is going on and have something similar to what Colorado had to suffer during this season, and also what Dallas and Nashville did before the MLS's back tournament, well, they are going to have to forfeit their playoff game, and virtually they're basically saying that they're going to get kicked out of the MLS playoffs this season. Now, as much as I understand that the league do not want to reschedule a playoff game because that will just mess up the playoffs and just push back the playoffs, where it's already pushed back to a time where this is probably the latest MLS Cup we will ever get in MLS history. But having said that, I don't think this is a good method whatsoever, and I understand that. I know when we look at the Colorado situation, and I know there was a lot of fans that was criticizing the fact that Colorado, they don't deserve to make the playoffs because they had the COVID break, and they should have just forfeit their season with them missing so many games. Well, here's the thing. As much as I know there's this kind of thinking, the fact that when a team have a COVID outbreak, and the fact that people tends to blame on them the reason why they got the outbreak because they kind of caused it themselves, or they have some players that kind of go out where they shouldn't do and then cause a COVID outbreak that is happening in their team. We don't know if that's the case. There could be a situation where a team unfortunately just had one unreported case, or the fact that they didn't know that anybody had COVID-19 before, and then next thing you know, it just basically spread to the other team. I mean, one thing we know about this virus is that it doesn't take much in terms of spreading to other people, and there could be a situation where you don't even know that if you might have it, or the fact that in terms of all these tests, what if some of the tests might be actually wrong? And we already saw a lot of false positive tests that it has happened this season. What if there's some situation where there might be some false negative tests too, and that, yeah. The bottom line is, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think just because a team that is endure on a COVID outbreak doesn't mean it's their fault, that they're the reason why they have brought the outbreak to themselves. And what MLS is basically doing right now is kind of saying that, well, it's your fault. You're basically the one that caused this COVID outbreak, so now you're basically going to get kicked out of the playoffs. And I can definitely see a situation where if you have a team that could be getting to got themselves into the semifinal or even the MLS Cup, I think that's probably the worst case scenario, where if we do have a team that gets to MLS Cup but they have a COVID outbreak before that MLS Cup is going to be happening, then we're going to have a USL Championship dilemma, where what are you going to do with MLS Cup? Are you going to do what the USL Championship is going to do, which is just basically not play the game and not even going to award a champion, or just automatically award the champion to the team that didn't suffer the COVID outbreak? And if that's the case, then that's completely unfair, because they didn't even have to play in an MLS Cup game, and they just got benefit of the doubt because of that. Either way, I mean, I just don't like the fact that teams are going to have to force to forfeit their game if they do endure a COVID outbreak, which is also why I'm hoping that will not be the case, and fingers crossed that we won't have that situation that is happening. But that being said, from what we've seen this season, there could be a real scenario where we're going to unfortunately see one or two teams that might have to forfeit their playoff game and get kicked out of the playoffs just because they unfortunately have to enter a COVID outbreak that is going on within their team. Now, moving away in terms of the whole COVID talk and kind of now talk about transfer rumors. Well, we had some transfer rumors for these last 3 days. One of them is that there is an MLS club that is interested in signing Hulk from Shanghai SIPG in the Chinese Super League, and I know the league, when they wrote the title of this article saying that an MLS club is interested in signing Hulk from Shanghai SIPG. I think I should just kind of rename that, or a better kind of title for this rumor should be the LA Galaxy is interested in signing Hulk from Shanghai SIPG, because you know that the Galaxy are probably the one that, knowing the fact that you have a relatively well-known name in Europe, and they're kind of like right around their mid-30s and in their twilight of their career, they're just going to try to bring them over just for the name's sake. And as I mentioned in my news, or in my moving forward series with the LA Galaxy, I really hope they don't do this, because if they do this, they basically just learn nothing from their past mistake, bring these age-old European superstar player and bringing him to the Galaxy just for the stake, just for the name's sake, and just to try to sell jerseys around the league, and that it just does not benefit in terms of them actually moving progress. Like I even said before, that we are now into an era of MLS where you can't just go to sign a big name European superstar player, play in MLS, and expect that will be just enough for you to be competitive and actually compete for MLS Cup. I mean, you might potentially get into the playoffs with that player, but as we have seen in the past couple of years, where you do have these big name European superstar player that plays with those teams, how many of those teams actually won MLS Cup during that time? The answer is 0. None of those teams had ever won MLS Cup, and it's just not a formula in terms of if you're going to, you might have success in the regular season, might get you in the playoffs, but when you do get into the playoffs, that's when it doesn't really, it's not really worth it to just kind of buy the player. And if you're going to have some MLS Cup aspiration, which for the Galaxy, as bad as things have gone, this is a team for a very long time in the league are supposed to be the top echelon of MLS, and a team that is supposed to be a top tier team, and you know that they are a team that they're not going to accept a long rebuild, and also a long futility of being stuck near the bottom of the MLS table. Now, another rumor coming out this week came from their LA club, that is LAFC, and that is Benfica is interested in LAFC attacker Brian Rodriguez. Now, I'm not quite sure what the fee exactly is for Benfica to pay LAFC to get Brian Rodriguez, but if it's actually a decent fee, I won't be surprised if LAFC is going to accept it. I mean, Brian Rodriguez no doubt has been one of the more disappointing DP signing that they had, and it seemed like he's just part of what it seems like a curse that is going on with LAFC trying to sign a third DP. I mean, we've seen before where LAFC tried to sign a third designated player, and it just didn't work out whatsoever. I mean, we saw it with Andre Horta in the first couple of seasons. That didn't work out, and eventually they sold him back to Portugal. And now it seemed like we might see a similar situation where Brian Rodriguez, although he has been a little bit better than what Andre Horta is, and at least he gets minutes compared to Andre Horta that didn't really get any minutes with LAFC, at least there could be a situation where LAFC could even cash in for a player that they feel like didn't really met their criteria of the amount that they of course paid him for. And then if that is the case, not only the fact that LAFC is going to get some money, but they can definitely replace with a much better player in that third designated player spot. And we know that every time when we mention LAFC, and they already have so much talent in their team, now that they're gonna potentially get free DP spot and sell one of their player and get some cash out of that just feels very unfair with the way how this team operates. But that's just the beauty of LAFC. They are considered one of the team that is one of the best operating team in terms of the front office in the league, and that again, I won't be surprised if LAFC, if they see that there's the right amount that they can of course sell Brian Rodriguez to Benfica, they will absolutely take that in a heartbeat. Now, another player that could potentially be going to Europe, and we know earlier this season that Brenden Aaronson is going to be making the jump to Europe and will basically be going to RB Salzburg after the end of the season. Well, there could be another Union player that could be making the jump to Europe, and that, of course, is Kai Wagner, that is actually now receiving offer from a couple of Premier League teams. I believe West Ham and Fulham are interested in terms of his service. And I also have heard a couple of Bundesliga teams have also trying to get the German back to his native country and play in the Bundesliga. Now, no doubt that Kai Wagner, I think he is probably one of the most underrated players in this league. And this is a guy that I don't think a lot of people have appreciated how good he is, and that he is considered probably one of the best fullbacks in this league, and maybe the most underrated fullback in this league. So it's not a big surprise the fact that there's a lot of European teams that have been scouting on him, and that they're looking to trying to get him for his service. And I heard that West Ham and Fulham, as I mentioned, they are offering about $3.5 million to the Union in order to get Kai Wagner. And for the Union, this offseason is going to be interesting because they're going to lose one of their best player, Brenden Aaronson, but they do get a huge sum of money. The question is, now that they of course no longer have him, and if they are potentially going to cash in their money for Kai Wagner, what's going to happen next season of the fact that are they going to once again spend money to try to bring in players to replace them, or they're just going to continue to invest in the academy? My guess is they're probably going to invest in the academy because this is a team that's not known for big spending, but it is also a team that has kind of took the same route that FC Dallas were a couple of years ago, and kind of almost become the next FC Dallas, where FC Dallas was one of the first MLS team that finds success in the league and become a competitive team to compete for MLS Cup just because of their academy. We're now seeing it with the Union, with them bring some good homegrown player from their academy and come through into their main team, and now those players are really shining for this team, and now this team has got themselves winning their first ever trophy in franchise history this year with the Supporter Shield. So yeah, we shall see what's going to happen in terms of this deal. But now moving away in terms of talk about transfer, to kind of talk about some awards from this week that was announced, and there was definitely some surprises and some that I definitely do not agree in terms of this specific player or coaches that was awarded this award. First of all, we got Diego Rossi winning Young Player of the Year, and this is one of those awards that I definitely did not agree, and kind of surprised that Diego Rossi won this award. Like, I understand Rossi, if you look at his number compared to the other Young Player of the Year nominee in Daryl DK and Brenden Aaronson, Rossi clearly has better number. But we know Rossi is a very decent player for the past couple of years, and in many ways I thought he would be the one that is running for MVP of the year rather than just the Young Player of the Year. So it's kind of weird that he got a nomination in terms of that, and it's even more surprising that he of course won this award, because the Young Player of the Year are usually players that they are kind of a hot prospect in MLS, and that usually they are players that just kind of came out of the rank, and kind of like a rookie that just kind of came out of the rank and started to become one of the hottest prospect in MLS. And I know the Young Player of the Year actually replaced the Rookie of the Year, and there's no doubt that Diego Rossi is not the Rookie of the Year because he's been in the league for the past couple of seasons. But we also saw guys like Daryl DK and Brenden Aaronson, and even though Aaronson isn't really a rookie, I thought this year was kind of his breakout year. And obviously Daryl DK, He's a rookie in MLS, but he also has been having a breakout year that, I could argue he could have also won the Young Player of the Year. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised Rossi won this one, but I guess maybe MLS just thought that, because of the stats and also what he has done throughout the past couple of years, they just thought, you know what, we have pretty much a lot of award to Diego Rossi. Let's just award him with a Young Player of the Year, and maybe later on we might even award him MVP of this league later on, that they're going to announce that the most valuable player this season in MLS. Now, in terms of goalkeeper of the year, or actually, let's get into coach of the year first. So, Jim Curtin is named coach of the year, and this is something that I kind of mentioned yesterday, where I was kind of shocked that Jim Curtin won coach of the year. Like, I know that the reason why Jim Curtin might have won coach of the year is because he won the Supporter Shield, and he won the first ever trophy for the Union in their franchise history, and that is definitely something that, when you win trophy, you're definitely going to be in contention and potentially win coach of the year. However, I really think if you look at which head coach has even a bigger impact to their team, it's got to be Oscar Pereira. I mean, I know Jim Curtin, he's been doing good this season, but he's already kind of made a good impact to this Union team starting from last season. And if anything, if Jim Curtin was the coach of the year from last season after getting that Union team to be a competitive MLS team, then I have no problem with that. But what I do have problem is that, we know that the Union is gonna be good this year, and he just basically make them a little bit better. But you also have a coach that basically took a team that was considered the bottom feeder of MLS and kind of the joke of MLS for the past couple of years, and now all of a sudden got themselves playing some of the best soccer I've ever seen an MLS team play, and also getting them their first ever playoff berth. I think that is probably a better achievement than what we already seen what Jim Curtin can do with this Union team. And that, again, I think Pereira probably should have got this award, and that it was kind of a little bit of a surprise that he did not get this award over Jim Curtin. Now, what is not a big surprise, as I'm going to talk about goalkeeper of the year, is Andre Blake, of course, getting goalkeeper of the year, and that there's really not a lot of discussion of the fact that he doesn't deserve this goalkeeper of the year, with how many times he has just single-handedly making some big save, and also robbing some opposition and stealing 3 points for the Union. I mean, Matt Turner could have been a close shout, because Turner also had a very decent season, but it's nothing come as close of what Andre Blake has done this season, which I think this is probably the best season he has ever has for all his time being with the Philadelphia Union. And finally, Walker Zimmerman, of course, win Defender of the Year. And I know there's definitely some Crew fans that was kind of disappointed that Jonathan Mensah didn't win this one, and that, in terms of stats-wise, Mensah actually has better stats-wise than what Walker Zimmerman did. But I think the reason why Zimmerman won this is because he made a bigger impact to the team compared to Jonathan Mensah. I mean, that Nashville defense, and really the reason why this Nashville defense is considered one of the most stingiest defense, and probably the most stingiest defense we have ever seen in an expansion team, has a lot to do with Walker Zimmerman. I mean, he has just you could even argue he got even better than when he was at LAFC, and that he was really the reason why this defense was so organized, and that the leadership that he took in this team and make them a rock solid defense is just absolutely unquestionable. And it's definitely not a big surprise, the fact that he eventually won Defender of the Year. And I think this is also the third season in a row where we saw the winner of the Defender of the Year was all because of a big off-season move where one of the team decided to sell one of their best defender to another team, and that the other team got that defender and turned him to a Defender of the Year. And I think from what we also learned from this is that, don't sell your best defender to another team in the off season. Like, why would you? Like, I understand you some team might be desperate in terms of having that sweet old general allocation money, or target allocation money in their pocket. But if you decide to just sell your best defender, yeah, that there could be some repercussion in terms of that. And we saw what happened last year when Iko Para was sold to Minnesota, and how the Loons immediately looked much better, while SKC was just collapsing in front of our eyes, and also their defense was an absolute mess. We saw the same thing about LAFC this time. If they would have had Walker Zimmerman in that team, there's no doubt that the defense is not going to be as bad as what we saw throughout this season. And that, again, as I said, once Zimmerman didn't get to Nashville, he has just completely transformed that team to be a very, very dangerous team heading into the playoffs, and a rock-solid defense heading into the playoffs. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that the Houston Dynamo, of course, have unveiled their identity and their name. Now, the logo, as I mentioned yesterday or just a couple of days ago, it's pretty much the same logo as the leak image that I mentioned a couple of weeks back, so I'm not going to really go too much into it. Now, in terms of the name itself, I'm happy the fact that they kept the Dynamo name, because I was actually worried the fact that they're going to go with like an FC or a Houston United kind of name, which would just kind of piss me off. The fact that I hate the fact that these new teams just don't have any creativity anymore in terms of coming up with their new name. But the fact that they did add FC right at the end of the Dynamo name kind of feels very, very irrelevant, and it's kind of almost similar to the route that the Chicago Fire took last season, where for whatever reason, they might still call the Chicago Fire, but they just basically added FC at the end of its name, and I just don't understand why. Like, why can you just call yourself Chicago Fire, and you have to add an FC right at the end of your name? I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's going to call this team the Houston Dynamo FC. Everybody's going to call this the Houston Dynamo, or the Dynamo for short. Nobody was going to call like Houston Dynamo FC or Dynamo FC in some sense. And I do like the fact that they did keep the black and orange kind of color, although it seemed like how the new logo looks, they kind of goes more into the black as their primary color. And the primary color of being black isn't the worst thing, but I just fear the fact that they're kind of just putting that orange color, which really pretty much put what makes the Dynamo unique, and it's pretty much in their identity that they are, of course, the team that always have orange as their primary color. I'm just worried that they're gonna pretty much put that as an afterthought, and that most of their jerseys upcoming is gonna be pretty much black, which again, it's not the worst thing, but it kind of feels like they're going away in terms of their old identity, which I think their old identity of having an orange color as their primary color just makes sense with this Houston Dynamo team, compared to them all of a sudden just go to black. But moving on, in terms of the next news, from talk about new logo that has been unveiled to talk about a team that is planning to get their new logo, and it's actually the Chicago Fire, who they actually did say that they are going to plan to scrap their current logo and are going to have a new one in 2022. And, fair play to the Chicago Fire, knowing what the fact that, there was a lot of criticism in terms of the logo that they basically put in. A lot of people are saying that that's the worst logo ever designed in MLS, and it seems like they kind of listened to the fans, and that they're thinking that they're going to scrap their current one and are going to get a new one in 2022. Now, I know there are some fans who say why they can't do it for next season. Well, if they're going to do it in 2021, that is a very, very quick rush, and that I think from what we saw from the previous logo, I feel like they probably rushed it in terms of trying to design one. And the last thing you need is that if you're going to try to create a better logo that is compared to the previous one that has looked very ugly, you don't want to just make another ugly logo and just once again anger a lot of your fans, and also so MLS fans around by seeing it. So I'm glad the fact that they actually decided to do it in 2022, and that they're actually going to take their times in terms of thinking about the new logo that they're going to come up with in 2022. And finally, Austin FC, as I mentioned last week, they're going to unveil their new jersey. Well, this week they, of course, have done that, and I'm going to get my phone right now to kind of show you their new jersey. And I actually love the new jersey that they are going to wear. It kind of remind me kind of a very retro kind of jersey that they have. Actually, where is it? There it is. Alright, not sure you can see it, but this is the new one that I like. I mean, the only thing I will kind of criticize in terms of this jersey is that I'm not really a big fan of the Yeti sponsorship logo kind of smack right down in the middle, and it kind of ruins a little bit of how this jerseys look. But you know, with the black and green stripe across, kind of like a retro kind of design, I really like that kind of way. It's a very low risk and kind of a pleasing kind of design. And knowing the fact that nowadays, with how many teams have kind of botched their logo and botched their design, and also nowadays with MLS jerseys seems to be just so, with a lot of them being very, very ugly. This is one of the ones that, you know, if I want to potentially buy a jersey in the future, this is definitely one that I want to get, because it looks very pleasing, and it really have that retro kind of look that with that black and green stripe that is in their jersey. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the news of the week. I know, again, this is a relatively long news of the week because I did have a lot to talk about during this week. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, if I didn't mention any news on this board and you want me to mention, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.